Hey, welcome to Immigrant Techies Alberta. We're happy to have everyone joining us tonight. This is our third meeting, actually. It's a relatively new group. We just started late last year. And I'm going to share my screen now just to talk a little bit about what we're about. Who we are. Immigrant Techies Alberta is a tech enthusiast group for highly skilled immigrants, and obviously those who like to support them or those who are just interested in the space, who are already in or are interested in pivoting to tech careers and startups. And what we represent, why are we doing this? It's because we recognize that there is a gap between what's happening in Alberta's innovation community and um, what what's obtainable in immigrant communities, especially for professional immigrants. And even for the space we have already in tech, it feels intimidating a lot to people who are just exploring the space. So we also represent this exploratory space for people who are just curious, people that just want to know what's going on. That's how I got in. I just wanted to see what was going on out there. So we're creating this space to act, to serve as that place where people can just come and see what's going on. And that will provide opportunities for networking and mentorship. As we come together, it's a community. So we rub off on each other, we help guide each other. That's the whole essence of this group, to be a curator of emerging tech content, events, resources, and career opportunities. So people know where to find resources. When we come to places like this, we can guide each other, we can help integrate people more into the tech community in whatever areas they are interested in. And the goal is to provide community and support professional immigrants who want to get into tech or want to advance in their careers. Yeah, so that is what we're about. And the whole point is community. If there's one word for it, it's just to create a safe space where it's super casual. There isn't, I mean, people are free to just ask questions, to be real, to be themselves, to ask any questions, even if it sounds too basic, because that's the way I feel sometimes when I go to tech gatherings. I'm like, what is okay to ask, what's not okay to ask, you know? But we create this space so that everyone feels free to, to ask whatever questions they might have. And so we have this event where we bring in someone, just like we have Zachary today, that will talk about something specific, something structured. And we also have less structured events, like we'll have in 2 weeks, which will be just ask me anything kind of event. So it's super casual and you can come in with all your questions as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Zachary, who is going to be sharing his story and giving us some pointers tonight on how he barely 3 years ago knew nothing about tech, and now he's a director of product at actionable.co. So welcome, Zachary.
Thank you. Thank you. And that is, it's true. 3 years ago, I knew nothing about tech. Now I work in product. I think maybe my title is a little elevated, but I have two main things to talk about today. One is my story of like why I landed in tech, how I did that. And then second, we're going to talk about some of the career paths in tech, and particularly knowing that not all the roles in technology are technical. So that's the two pieces I'm going to go through. I do have a presentation. Please feel free to jump in if you have questions. I'll try to pause. I do have quite a bit of material to get through, but I think we can move through it quite quickly. So I'm going to share my screen. Mommy, can you see that?
Yes.
My face.
Mm-hmm.
So my story. So I went to school and university. I took chemical engineering and business, and I spent 6 years in banking. And I left banking to join to join a company that was doing, it was an oil and gas related company. And I was joining in a kind of a corporate development role. And what happened there is I just kind of learned that one, that this type of industry wasn't the industry I wanted to get into. But secondly, I started working less than in my banking days. And I just started having time to discover what was out there in the Calgary technology community. So I really was at a crossroads of what do I want to do in my career, and where do I want to go? And what I ended up doing is I just started uncovering what was in the Calgary tech community. I actually said to my partner, I think I have to move or leave this city in order to pursue a career in technology. And what I uncovered is there was more happening. And I just got really excited. And there's really the main reason I got excited about technology is the combination of technology and people. And what I mean by that, and I watched this documentary called AlphaGo, and if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. But where they got to is a place of the combination of both people and technology gets us to a place as a civilization where we think about things in a different way than we would have thought of alone on our own. And I don't want to steal the punchline of the documentary, but it adds additional creativity and is almost an extension of how we think about problems and how we tackle solutions. And it's really that combination. It's not the fact that we're building technology to automate things, it's the fact that we're using technology to enable us to be more creative or get to solutions that we weren't able to get to before. That really excited me. The other part that I really love about technology is it is truly a combination of art, science, and business. This is stolen from a guy named Naval Ravikant. He said this to me once. He's a prominent angel in the Valley. And the greatest thing about working in tech, particularly in software where I work, is there really is a design aspect, an art of how do we make this experience a great experience for our users. There's the science aspect of the computer science, the technology of how are we building this application to scale? How do we model our data? And how do we provide that to users in a way that provides insight? And then there's the whole business aspect of the commercial viability of that business. And because of that, I got just drawn into the startup community, and I left my job in corporate, and I jumped into a coding boot camp. And during that coding boot camp, that was really my time to uncover what was tech, and what it wasn't, and the different roles in it. And I started to learn about there was roles that outside of product, which I'm going to touch out at the end, or not outside of engineering, not full stack development, which I was taking. And I also thought about what type of problems I wanted to solve. So in that journey, understanding why I was interested in tech, which I've gone through, but also thinking about what are the problems that I want to solve that really motivate me, I think was a really important part. And I'll be touching more of that in this presentation. But what I found at the coding bootcamp is a lot of people spend a lot of time on building out a skill, learning how to code, which is really important. If you want to join the technology industry, you need to understand the industry and build skills that are relevant to the industry. But it's just one piece of the equation. So I saw a little bit too much or experienced just a lot of focusing on building a skill as well as updating a resume. And the resolution is, and this is great, but reskilling your skills on your resume, which are also an important piece. But also, again, is just one element of what you need to do if you really want to find work, and particularly fulfilling work. And this next slide is probably, I would say, the most important slide, I think, in the deck. Is through my transition of being in a crossroads and trying to figure out what I want in my career, I really had to think about what what was going to motivate me and what was going to be a good fit for me. And I did a lot of soul searching. I did work with a career coach, and I was focused on skills, values, interests, and purpose. And I really, this is a discovery process, but I would take away to write these things down and really try to understand what are the values that and interests and skills. And if you can get to purpose, there's a great statement, Simon Sinek video on this of there's 3 circles of purpose, and he goes deeper. So I can send that out. But this I mapped out, and then I started comparing it to roles in the industry. And that's really what gave me the clarity of moving into product. Particularly, I wanted to work into product because you get to be the bridge between the users, the business, as well as the technical engineering team. You really are in discovery and you're testing assumptions. And that is something that I was good at in my previous roles and a place that I wanted to be in. Being between that user and being the voice of the user and empathizing with the user and developing solutions with engineering or for that user. As well as I was really motivated on how do we get people to work better together, and really focused on companies that were building things around shared learning experiences. And as I narrowed my focus, more opportunities presented themselves, and more I was getting better references, and just people had more interest in me because they knew what I was interested in, what I was good at, and what was going to motivate me, and they could put me into the right roles. And that those opportunities started to present myself for a career. So I think the more you can do this discovery of what's going to motivate you will be really helpful in landing the next position. I'm just going to pause. Is there any questions on anything I've gone through so far?
Okay, so far everything clear.
Great.
Sam, one quick question. Are you going to talk more about the discovery process, or how did you realize that, hey, this is what I would like on the software or the tech side, and this is what I wouldn't? Like, you could have probably been a project manager and done, say, 70% of what you do on the product side. Like, how was your discovery process?
Yeah, and we could talk about roles. The discovery process was a lot of talking to people, and I'm going to talk about networking in this presentation, but it's a lot. I think it's a few facets. So one is talking to people in those roles and understanding what those roles are. Secondly is really reading, and like I find Twitter to be extremely helpful. I am going to talk about that. Following people with those formidable roles on Twitter, seeing what they're writing, what they're talking about, what are the challenges. And I was consuming a ton of podcasts at the time. I do a lot less now of the industry. And particularly, I was listening to a podcast at A16Z. I was devouring it, and other ones. And I was just trying to like piece all those pieces together of what are the roles, what's going on in tech, what excites me. And it just, the combination of just different learning. So taking in content, but also trying to talk to different people, like going to this event. This is part of your discovery. And then just reflecting on that, and you think, would that be a good fit for me, or wouldn't that be a good fit for me? So it is a little bit more of an art than a science, but it is important. And I think the connecting with people and trying to understand their roles and how everyone fits in technology is an important part. And one thing that will happen when you talk to these people is you're actually going to become more knowledgeable about the industry. And then you can have more in-depth conversations in your next conversation. And that kind of snowballs, as well as once you've learned enough, you can go back to that person that you talked to before and being like, thanks for talking to me before. I've learned this, this, and this. Would you mind following me up about this topic? And you'll start putting the pieces together. But there's an active role in relationship building and learning. I don't know if that answered your question, but it was just a lot of discovery and networking
And that makes sense. Thank you.
and career coaching. So I did have a career coach work with me. I'm happy to send that out. I can either put it in the chat at the end or otherwise. I found that very helpful. It can be an expensive thing. Like my career coach is about $170 an hour. I was working with him once to twice a month. I think you can do it on your own, but if you do want some assistance, I think that's also an avenue. Transferable skills. So there's three main additional things. I'd say really understanding your why, transferable skills, and networking. And transferable skills, it's really important to understand what you were good at in your old role and be able to say to your new employer, or if you're looking at a new career, why you can transfer those skills into a new role. And if you're looking for transferable skills, I just pulled this up from the World Economic Forum. These skills to the left, these top 10 skills that are needed are very, can be used in pretty much any role in tech. And I'm sure all the roles that you've done have had elements of this. But for example, back in finance, I was really good at getting the team together and rallying them around an idea, and trying to just communicate among a team what we're trying to build and why and get things done. And that was a very similar skill set to product. Just being able to demonstrate why you think those are similar, or just show that you understand the role that you're going into and the skills that are needed and what skills you can bring is really important. And I'd say do not sell yourself short. You have really great skills in whatever other industry that you worked in. And you are going to bring those to the table while you're learning these more technology related skills. So just, I think having confidence that you have skills that are super applicable, you just need to build out some more technology nuanced skills, is important. So just, if there anything, I can just motivate you to not sell yourself short. You have the skills that are needed. You just need to be able to demonstrate it in a way that's understandable to the audience. And with that, if I go back to the resumes or whatever, you just need to make your resume speak tech a little bit more and take out any of the jargon from your old roles or old industries. As the more you talk about those other industries, the less you feel like you're a technology employee, and the more you feel like you belong still in that old industry. Next one is relationship building, and I cannot stress this one enough. When I was in my career search, I was talking about 8 to 9 people a week. And every single job I've ever got in my career has been through someone. I just had a family member who she just got a job she's really excited about, and it was totally through cold networking. Wasn't technology, but everyone I know gets their job through this relationship building. And I don't know many people that actually get even interviews from applying. And I know as an immigrant, and my fiance, it comes from an immigrant family. She did move here when she was 15, but her parents came. That can be really daunting because you don't have a network here. But understand that most people are willing to help. And just when you reach out, just be very clear of why you reached out to them, what you want to talk about. And ideally, if you can find someone with some similar interests, if they came from a similar industry that you came from previously and pivoted over, or if they have some sort of similar background, that does provide another in. And then as you go to events, I know it's difficult in a COVID world, just that the objective of the event is to find one other person that you can have coffee with or talk about to learn more about that industry and get yourself known that you want are looking in this industry. As well as I'd say in your own personal network, if you know some people that you've moved here, just ask them if they know anyone in the technology community, because you'd be surprised who they know. And they can think about those social connectors that you know or know a lot of people of your friend group. Ask them, and they likely can connect you with who you know. But you get better at this as you go. And I know you've all networked before, but breaking into this industry will likely be finding someone who has a need and has known you for a little bit and understands that you're looking for an opportunity and that you're available. There's a few places to do this. On the left are Slack channels that I'm in Calgary. So I'm in the Product Calgary Slack channel, the Rainforest Alberta Slack channel, the YYC Design and Develop Slack channel. I think everyone on this call, if you're interested in getting into technology, should get in those Slack channels and just understand what people are talking about. And there's jobs being posted there, there's events being posted there, but they're all really good places to meet people. There is Pixels and Pints, which is probably a better event before COVID. I always really enjoyed that event. It's more engineering focused, but people were really, really open and they just talked about anything. It was super casual. There's no agenda. Startup Calgary has an events page on their website. So they actually have a lot of the events that are going on in the city. As well as LinkedIn and Twitter. And obviously all of you likely use LinkedIn because that's where this event was posted, but I really enjoy Twitter. Twitter's probably not as useful for the Calgary ecosystem, but if you want to know what's going on in tech down in the Valley and what the thought leaders are saying about technology, that is by far the best place to find it. The tech community is all on Twitter and they're all tweeting all their learnings all the time. So I highly recommend going on Twitter. And what you can do is find someone that's a thought leader in that space, go look at their profile and see who they're following, and then you can follow the same people. I do see there's a few things I missed in the chat.
They were mostly comments, just.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other questions? I'm almost through the section of how I got into technology. And then we'll quickly pivot into roles in tech.
Well, I have a question. Well, basically, you say it's really, really hard to find a job just applying to jobs or in Indeed or LinkedIn or something like that, right?
I didn't quite, were you saying not to apply on Indeed or LinkedIn, or it's not enough to do that?
Yeah, it's not enough. Yeah,
no. Like, so in my cohort at Evolve U, no one got a job by applying online. They all went out and found these companies. And this is the thing, if you have a why, like I was really focused on, I want to help organizations work better together. I want it to be about shared learning. And I ended up in organizational behavior change startup. It was like, I asked the world what I wanted, and in my networking, I was like, this is what I'm looking for. This is how I want to contribute. And those opportunities come. Now it does come a little bit counterintuitive because you're like, oh, am I limiting myself from opportunities? I do work at a remote company, which I highly recommend. It opens up a lot more opportunities. You don't actually have to look just in Calgary. And remote after COVID is just such a prominent thing. I was just talking to someone who just started in technology and is working for Shopify in Calgary. And he got his job from someone he loosely knew over LinkedIn, asked him if Shopify was looking. He referenced him in and he actually got into Shopify. Again, another story of building a relationship, but someone needs to put that resume on the pile for you. Like, yes, you'll probably get in the process unless it's a small startup. If it's a small startup, you may be the only person they talk to because it's opportune that you were looking for something, you showed interest, you showed the skills, and you were willing to work. And I'm going to talk about that in 2 more slides about how I got into tech, because it was a little bit of hustle. So let me pause on that and I'll get back to it. But if you are building on a skill and you're applying online only, it's going to be really difficult. And I highly encourage you to spend some of your energy, or even more than some, like a significant amount, meeting people, talking to people, and just reiterating or iterating on your learning about what you want. Because every person you talk to, every experience you have is going to validate or invalidate what you want, and you may change directions, but it allows you to, through those conversations, continue to think about what is available to you. Now, if you can even do small projects or side projects, that's even better because you have more skills as well as more networking.
Got it. Thanks.
This slide is just, there's Tech West Collective. I'm not sure if people know about them, follow them. They do an event like every 6 months. And this was just from one of their slides. So they did an event with all the companies and you could go talk to them. And this is just a slide that, and if you want to take a screenshot of it or somehow we can get the slide out, these are kind of a bunch of companies that work in Calgary in the tech ecosystem. Some of them are small, some of them are big, but I at least wanted to put something out there so you guys know what some companies look like. I'm sure you have been meeting companies as you go, but here's kind of like a logo splash of 30 or 40 companies that you can research, or maybe it's less than that. And then my last slide is that break in the window concept. So my story at Actionable was I was talking about I wanted to work in kind of like some sort of place where we're making work better. And then an acquaintance of mine introduced me to the founder of my company, and they were about to rebuild their product. And he said, hey, we're going to do these design sprints. Will you come out to Toronto and do these design sprints with us? You can just kind of contribute. And I did that and on my own dime. And then they're like, well, we've done these design sprints. We need to build these designs. Can you build a design? So I learned design software. That's not where I learned at Evolve U, and built out the designs and started as a contract UX designer. Never done UX design before. And then over time, convinced the company that they needed a better product practice and that I should become a product manager, and essentially became full-time as a product manager. And then they promoted me to director of product, and I work in a small startup. So I think it is a little bit of a glorified title, but there is a progression there of just hustle and willingness to help. And because of that, I was the only product person. I really leaned on the product community in Calgary. What I actually did was I met a lot of product managers before I got into product. And when they got into product, we started putting them together. And now I do a monthly product roundtable with 13 other product managers, a lot of the companies you just saw, to learn from them. And now I have a pretty strong network in the product community. So that's kind of a continuation of what's going to happen in your networking. If you meet these people, what you can do as a super connector is start connecting the people you've connected into, and then you become a little bit in the center of that community.
Hey, Zach, can I just interrupt for a second?
Yeah, of course.
So when you're talking about like your breakthrough period there, can you specify like kind of your comfort level and what stage you felt you were at when you made that breakthrough? Like your foundation, it sounds like you had already completed your coding basics or foundations course. You had already had some tech exposure and work in the field. And you were kind of working up to that point. But when you're saying you had never done the UX design before, and so you kind of learned that on the fly, and you went out there and you contributed your thoughts and opinions, and that's what led to your breakthrough. What point were you at? Like more of an intermediate level?
Well, essentially, I've never done anything before. Like I went and did a coding bootcamp. I wasn't really working in tech before. I was helping a startup for a little bit, kind of pro bono on more of the business development side. I helped them get a grant and kind of connect them into the community. But I was junior. Like I had lots of significant experience working at the bank. And I did quite well there. So that demonstrated some high competency like other people on the calls. But as a product person or a designer, I was brand new, but I was ferociously learning from other product people in the community, people on Twitter, reading books. If people are interested in product, I can give you a list of 4 or 5 good books. Like when we did the design sprint, I like read the design sprint book and was essentially almost facilitating it at the time. But like any job, you just kind of have to do it. You're like, and you got to understand that you're going to fail at some things. And technology if you're in a good technology organization, it's all about failing. You're iterating, you're experimenting, and you're failing, and you're learning from your failures as quick as possible in that design phase before you even get to engineering. And
Would,
that's
would it be
sorry, go
more
ahead.
fair? Would it be more fair to say that you had more significant exposure at that time and not necessarily more of a intermediate level skill set, more beginner junior stage of a skill set, but based on the exposure, that's where it was something where you felt like you could tackle something brand new?
Yeah, like the excitement was there. I don't like the word junior or beginner, but essentially I hadn't done it before. Like when I see junior in people's titles, I think that's disempowering. But like I was the only person doing that role in the company, and they needed someone to do it, and I kind of just took the reins, and it worked out. But it only worked out because I was constantly trying to validate what I was learning with other people that were in the profession. Um,
If I
so
if I could build a little on that, so apart from your own experience, Zach, do you see where companies will take on junior, I mean, permit me to use the word junior developers, that like someone that went through the boot camp? Are companies open to actually hiring fresh off boot camp people? Because the sense I get is that they look for the most senior, or at least intermediate level. That it appears that we have quite a few junior developers right now, but companies are looking for more senior people. So do you find companies more open these days to people that just came out of boot camp?
yeah, I can only comment by how people did it in my course. I would say like they're getting to intermediate level of coding ability. Like you know the stack, you can build a basic application, you understand testing, you can code, but you haven't been able to work in a team in a scaled environment. And someone will just have to see you and your potential and say, this is the type of person we want on our team. They have the basic skills. We don't want people that don't know how the technology stack. Um, but it's a really tough question. The people that they really worked hard on their coding, and they also networked. And I saw people in my coding class went from zero coding to getting a job in 4 or 5 months, but it was a full-time job for them both to learn the coding and the networking, and they were building relationships as they go. All the people that got jobs fast, all were networking like 4 or 5 coffees a week, as well as building up the skills. So it is a lot of work. It's certainly doable, but you do have to get to a level of a certain competence, particularly in development, but I think anything to get there. I will move to roles in tech because I don't want to run out of time. And I do want to leave some time for questions at the end, but we are asking questions. I guess it's roles, not role in tech. But a lot of people think technology is like this complicated thing, like all these words about AI and um, blockchain or whatever. But yes, there is some complexity to computer science, but it really is having to put things into a database, presenting that database to a user, and that user being able to enter things into the database or manipulate the data or get some insight from the data by using that software. But algorithms are getting more complicated and there's underlying technology. But it really is about it's a more simple business model of you're building a product or a service for a user. You're selling that or marketing that product. When your users are using that product, you're trying to provide even more value to them and expanding that user base and what they're willing to pay to you. and then you're supporting that business, the operations of the business in particular, in functioning. And those are the core roles of a technology organization. It's really about, can we build something and market it so people will buy it and then grow with us as we're growing the company. And this same circle I found online somewhere of these are similar roles of marketing. There's the product build, which is not on this, but building that product with product and engineering, marketing, promoting that product, sales, converting the leads, customer success. And I'm going to go through each of these roles in particular. Customer success, enabling those customers to use their product and get value out of it, as well as the support functions as finance, operations. So there are different roles in tech. And this slide is from HubSpot. And this is their team at 100 people. And HubSpot is, although they're much larger now, a very prominent CRM software, large SaaS business. And what I wanted to show here, although HubSpot is a sales-led organization, is about 20% of the staff work in engineering, or 12% in this case, or and product. And I'd say most organizations have a little bit more, but there is other roles in technology. You don't need to become a full stack developer or an engineer. Now, those are very important roles. And if you're interested in the engineering or technology side, that's great. But not everyone needs to do it. If you're thinking, okay, I want to get into tech, but I don't really want to code all day, well, there's all these other roles that you can do. And there may be roles that are more transferable to you based on what you've done in the past. So I'm going to go through each of these 4 quadrants and just kind of talk about the roles. So first is build. And build is really about a product team. And that typically is a product manager, a product engineer, product or engineers, product designers, and then there's other roles like data analyst, solutions architect, but usually these are other technical roles dealing with the technology. But there is product management is what I do, and that's really understanding the value of the customer. There's the product design, which is usability, how it looks and feel, is the user experience right? And then there's the core engineering. And I would say, just so you guys have a sense of these proportions, a typical organization is about 5 to 8 engineers to 1 designer or 1 product manager. So there are a lot more engineering roles than designer manager roles in technology. But there are other roles for there based on what you find interesting to you. The product development lifecycle is really between discovery and delivery. And you really need both. And when we talk about project management, that really is the right side of like, okay, and it's not even the right side. Like this is such an agile process where you're constantly doing continuous discovery and things are changing. You can't really project manage it. You're kind of doing it real time. I guess you could project manage it, but things will change on the fly all the time and it's continuous. It's not a project, it's a product. It's ever evolving. But I just wanted to put this here because this is essentially the product creation process from moving to ideas, to validating those ideas, building out opportunities, thinking about how they should be designed, and then prioritized and how they are developed and deployed into your product. And that's really, product managers kind of overseeing this, but the engineers and the designers play a critical role in all of these pieces. Talking about product, I'll spend a little bit more time on product because I am a product manager, but essentially the main roles is shape the product, that is continuous discovery, that's talking to users, understanding their needs, validating your assumptions, and just understanding what is going to provide the most value to them. So it's really about talking to users and testing assumptions. Syncing the people, so syncing all the different stakeholders in your organization, engineering, design, but also your sales team, your marketing team, your customer success team. They need to know about how the product's going to work what features are going to be delivered, what outcomes can be expected, so they can do their job selling that product, marketing the product, or getting people to use the product. So you really need to be able to communicate well with all stakeholders about the direction of the product and also take in their opinions and advice. And lastly is ship the product. Do what you need to get done to remove roadblocks so engineering can ship the product and deliver a product, quality product. So there's a quality role in that. And that's also taking things away and just making sure that we're shipping and shipping and shipping. So those are the three main buckets. And the next slide is just to reiterate, there's a continuous discovery process before we're delivering. And if you're in a company where someone's just kind of making shots, we need this, we need that, we need this, but you're not continuously testing those assumptions with customers, that's a poor product practice. So as a product person, you really should like running experiments, failing, and just trying to figure out different solutions for customers. So I will park there because I'm going to jump into kind of more the selling of the product or the sales function. But any questions on product or engineering or design, knowing that I am a product person, but I can answer questions about anyone on the product team.
Yeah, I have one. Where does UX design fit in?
Yeah, so UX design is design. So they're usually working mostly in that discovery process, but also in delivery. Like they're working hand in hand with the product manager. Now I do the UX design in my organization. So maybe you'll have another speaker, a designer, a product manager that's actually in a larger organization where they're working together. But they're really focused on the usability, right? So as a product manager, I'm trying to figure out the value that's being provided and prioritizing the business value to the user, and the designer is trying to make that experience, the usability of the feature as best as possible. So they also are spending a lot of time doing testing with users, seeing what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, user testing and refining their prototypes as fast as they can before we give it to the engineering team. Now, engineering can also be part of that design process. And ideally, we're all sitting together talking about the solution. Engineering has some input about what will work from a feasibility standpoint. But they are really focused on more of that prototyping, creating prototypes, creating designs, testing those designs, talking to engineering about what can work, and product manager around the value. But a lot of doing the actual mock-ups and Figma screens so people can actually see what that app would look like before they build it.
Could you have done, if you hadn't gone through the coding boot camp, do you think you could be doing what you're doing right now just fine?
I don't think I could have done what I'm doing right now without dedicating the time to learn technology. I do not think I needed to do a coding bootcamp. Certainly not. At the time, I just didn't know how to get into tech, so I decided to do a coding bootcamp. But I don't think you need to go and do a coding bootcamp if you want to do a non-coding role. There's a really good course. I actually have a resource that I've put together. And maybe I can share that to you, Mommy. I'm not sure if we have people's emails and I can share that out, but I kind of put a bunch of resources together for all the different roles. And there's a really good course called Zero to Mastery by Andre Nagoy. And it's like $20 on Udemy. And if you just watch that course, you don't even have to code it, but you could, that would be enough to really understand how full stack web development works. It's probably like a 30 or 40-hour course versus doing like a 6-month immersive. Now, do I think it hurt me? No, absolutely not. But I don't think it's necessary if you're looking for a non-technical role. Product, maybe you would want to get in a technical role. But I think if you're interested in product, I would probably go out and take product courses, like from product school or other places versus coding bootcamp. But everyone has their own journey.
Yeah, one question that I have is, do you think there's like a base level, like, do you think this is a high school level plus, or do you think this is more of a, no, once you've because like you said you did chemical engineering and then you ended up going into banking.
That's right.
So like I would say you would have a stronger foundation than somebody else like myself that I've done vocational schooling, which is basically I've gotten two different trade tickets. I would still say that mine is a more field-based role, which does have its advantages, but your foundation would be stronger as an entry-level tech position. Do you think this is going from a high school level plus, or do you think there's some other kind of foundation that certain individuals would have to backfill with, say, the coding foundation or the other course that you were just mentioning there?
The You certainly need the skills. So I have a couple thoughts there. One is technology is usually pretty open to people with without university degrees. That being said, like you really need to dive in and really want it. Like there's a guy in my coding boot camp, and he did do the coding boot camp too. So it is a big dedication. But he was an oil field rig driller before, and now he's a software developer, and I know he's making well over six figures. But he really dedicated himself to learning it. I'm talking like 50, 60 hours a week. Now, there are technology companies, I'm not as familiar with them, in that more in the IoT sensor space that need people with trades experience to help with implementing the technology. So they go to the field and they're working with the customer and getting that technology into the field. Let that be oil and gas or other industries. I think there's a company in town called Adabotics that does fulfillment for kind of large e-commerce companies, and they need technicians. So you do need to decide of like, do I want to still do my trades and maybe be still in the field, but work in a technology organization? Or do I really want to really pivot and be in front of the computer all day, doing work like coding or design or product? And then we can talk about the other roles, but that is, the bigger the pivot, the harder it's going to be. They're certainly doable, but you just kind of have to dedicate yourself and believe in yourself. So there is some personal discovery there of, am I just interested in technology because it's a growing industry and I like what's going on there and I want to continue to use my trades, or do I really want a different experience in my work experience where I'm sitting in front of a computer, I can work from home, etc. Is that helpful?
Yeah, it's just like based on like the kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't want to call it a generic composition, but just the example of the composition of the team that you said one of this, 5 to 8 of the engineers, etc. And for me personally, being more of a field-based person where like I'll work alongside somebody else who's working remotely, but I'm working in the field because I'm try to interpret what the PLC is doing and what that actually means, like what is physically happening on a sortation system where there's all these moving parts and motors and stuff like that. So I understand in my organization, there's a role for somebody like that, but in a more tech oriented startup type of a role, I just have a hard time kind of connecting the dots and saying, okay, there's a field technician over here within this example that's provided, because it just seems all kind of remote based, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so Tyler, I should caveat it. I should have done it at the beginning of the presentation. I work at a software company. Finding a technician, there's not going to be a technician, what we call the SaaS, where it's literally the service is the software. But there are other companies that are using a blend of sensors and hardware with software. And that's where I would focus your attention. So there's a really great consortium. It's called Alberta IoT. Those are the type of companies you're going to be looking for. IoT's Internet of Things. They have sensors that are out in the field. They're taking data from those sensors, and they're using software to help the performance of whatever they're working in. There's a company in town called Validare. They do some AI technology on some market blending. But the Alberta IoT site, I just got exposed to last week, has like 100 companies that I didn't even know of. And I would look there first if you're like a technician type, and start digging into those companies. They have like a logo splash on their website and go through them. Because you're right.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me is when you've mentioned more principles along like understanding your why and transferable skills and what can you actually offer. And then for myself in particular, I'm not sure if there's other people on the call that have a similar background to myself, but it's just, it seems a little bit more narrow. And for example, like for myself as an electrician, as you're coming up throughout the trade, they say, oh, geez, you know, you could get in controls, you could get into just fire alarms, you could do automations, you could do high voltage switching. You know, there's all these different things, but I think you mentioned that you were going to include a resource on more of a grand scope of all the roles that are available. But that's where right now it's my understanding that understanding your why and trying to get those transferable skills that you've spent so many years working on, it kind of narrows your path unless say you have a very adaptive skill set, or you didn't realize you had such an interest in a certain thing.
Yeah, totally. Tyler, let's I'm happy to take this conversation offline. I do want to finish the deck before the top of the hour so everyone can get all the content if they have to leave. I'm not leaving right at the top of the hour, but can continue that discussion then.
Yeah, for sure. Great.
The next is sell. So there's really two parts. And again, this is traditional SaaS company. There are hardware companies, IoT companies, robotics companies that do have other needs. But there is really two pieces. And marketing is making people aware of your product. It's demand generation. It's the person is coming to the company because they've heard of the company through branding, SEO, social media, etc. And then there's sales. Sales is about converting that lead. So if you have your sales funnel, you have your lead come in, and that's when you really get into that conversation of trying to convert them into a customer. So there really is two elements, and they are different skill sets. Sales is about closing a deal and getting people to see the value in your product, and likely a company that has higher value products. Marketing is about building strategies around brand, SEO, social media, but how do we get people to be aware of our product? And then after you sell, you move into expand. And customer success is a super important field in SaaS and in technology. Of these people are dealing with the customers day in, day out, and they're creating strategies and content and resources and enabling them to use that software better. And there's two facets to that. Yes, the customer is getting more value, but secondly, we're actually trying to get them to use more of our product so we can make more money. We are expanding our revenue as we put in more features and more outcomes into our product. We can actually grow with our customers, and ideally our software might be enabling them to grow with their goals. So it allows us we're not just trying to get new customers in the door to create a valuable business, we're also trying to expand our customer base. And then lastly is support. And there's a lot of roles in here, but I do want to talk about biz operations. Business operations is about just running the business. And these are more common in companies like DoorDash or Skip the Dishes or a hardware company where you actually have other people than just users of the software. You will have people that are delivering food or working out in the field, or just more of an operational role is making sure that everyone is onboarded and can do what they need to do through different processes and systems, as well as tracking those metrics of how is the business functioning. So it's more of an operations or strategic role, as well as there's other roles such as finance, there's HR, kind of like all those regular roles that you would see in all these other companies, those exist also in technology to support them. And then lastly, this is my last slide, and then we can go back to questions, is just coming back to how do you find that perfect career? And I have some notes on the right, but it's, yeah, build that framework, write out your values, interests, skills, and purpose, if you can, and work through that. And it's iterative, and then just compare it to job postings in your discussions and be like, does that fit or doesn't fit? Next is explore, network with other people, research, use Twitter, and iterate. If you can try to do some small jobs or get your feet wet, or do something that's a small piece, you can learn a little bit more of what works for you. So that is the conclusion of the presentation. We are on questions now. I'm happy to stick around. I did want to provide a little bit more questions in the end, but I think we did talk about quite a few questions during the presentation, so hopefully that was valuable. And I'm not sure, Wemi, if you have any things you want to say before the top of the hour.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zach. That was full of good info. I was busy taking notes here myself. And thanks, Tyler, for helping answer some questions in the chat. I can see how some questions were already answered in the chat. So if there is any other question, I guess we can do just one more and then we'll just wrap up. I have a poll here. If you can just fill this out.
I have a question.
Go ahead, please. Yeah.
So Zachary, could you talk a little bit about Alberta or Calgary specifically and the tech scene? Because I'm a new immigrant in the country, recently moved to Toronto, and like I've just followed you on LinkedIn, and I was planning to move to Calgary just based on what you mentioned, like the discussions we've had. So like I would really appreciate some insights about how the tech scene is and how the people are, what's the best way to reach out to them with COVID especially.
Yeah, so Calgary's technology scene is, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, toddler stage. Like there are companies here for sure, and there's a lot of startups here, but it's much more robust in Toronto or in Vancouver. There's no doubt in my mind, particularly if you're looking to work at large companies, Microsoft, all the big FANG companies, but even Shopify or Slack, even though Shopify is fully remote now, like you're going to see those bigger companies in those markets. There is, I think Calgary's got a tight-knit technology community that's ever growing. There's a lot of really interesting things going on, and people are interconnected, and I think it is a friendly place. I really can't compare it to other tech, what's going on in other groups, but there is traction here and momentum. I think one thing that is nice about Calgary compared to Toronto is we're all live a little bit closer together, although we're in a remote environment, but it's easier to get to the meetups. It's easier to see people, given the proximity to downtown's closer to most people than the travel that you have to do if Toronto, particularly if you're living in the suburbs. And we do see quite a mix of companies. Like there is the oil and gas focused technology firms, but there is it seems to be a reasonable emphasis on fintech, with Benevity, ShareWorks, Neo. Those are all fintech companies, and they're all quite large. Or Neo's growing, like those are billion plus companies, 500 plus employees. Neo's smaller, and then we are starting to see the right support mechanisms. So it's a small community. I think it's a friendly community to reach out. I wouldn't hesitate to reach out to people on LinkedIn. Again, I would join those Slack channels that I mentioned. Wemi, do we have people's emails or a way to communicate to them after this?
Most people are on the meetup group, so we will post all the information, including this this recording will be on the meetup channel. Yeah,
because I do have a really great resource. There's a guy named Jason Ribeiro. If you if you don't know him, he kind of posts a lot about Calgary. He is on paternity leave now. He
Mhm.
did a presentation, about an hour presentation. There's a recording on it about why Calgary. I thought that was the best presentation that I've seen on what's going on in the Calgary ecosystem. So when we post that resource, look for that. It's also on my LinkedIn. One of the posts I did was to it. I think he summarizes it really well, but I also think that Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, their technology communities are ahead, and there are more opportunities there. Now there is also more people,
Mhm.
so
Yeah,
I wouldn't
for
say like
sure there's a lot of encouragement here right now. Like it's you feel the support. So even though it's
Mhm.
still toddler stage, like you said, but we can say it's the direction that the province is going. We have industry backing, government backing. At least that's what it looks like now. It feels like the tech community is being really supported.
Mhm.
Yeah, which is why, I mean, it's one of the reasons that we are trying to empower immigrant professionals to come to Alberta, that there is support here, even though maybe oil and gas is going down. There's a lot more interesting things going on in this province. Yeah. So come on, we want to have you.
I'm taking the next flight out of
Great.
Toronto.
like I think of the other things about Calgary, right, is the cost of living compared to Toronto and Vancouver. It's not
Mhm.
as different from Montreal, and if you like being near mountains, I think that's like the main benefit of the city, right? The cost of living and being near the mountains. If you like being coastal, obviously there's other cities that are better for that. I went to school out east in Ontario, not in Toronto, but in London, and knowing spending time away from the mountains made me want to come back. Um, there's just something really, I don't know. I just really enjoy being there, and I think a lot of people in the city do as well. So there are other benefits, but every place has got their pros and their cons for sure.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you everyone. We're past the top of the hour. So in the link there, Minako posted the link to the meetup group. That's where this recording will be posted. And we really would like you to join us there because we presented this event both on LinkedIn and on Meetup. But it's on Meetup group that we actually have everything together. That's where we share resources and any other information we have. So we really encourage you to join. And on the flip side, if you are out of bootcamp or you're self-teaching yourself something that you want a project on the side, we could use some help building a website for this group. So if you would like to volunteer, we would love that. And if you also are social media savvy, we would also like to have someone to help with to have the group represented on our channels. Okay, I think we should go now. And since Zach said he's not in a hurry, we'll just hang out maybe for another 2-3 minutes for anyone that wants to stay. And I'll stop the recording right now. Thank you everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Yeah, thanks